Guys, sorry for this delay, but yes, I am now 8 years old. Woo, baby! Sorry for the lack of videos for a bit. I was busy with some stuff, and I had to celebrate my birthday, and I had to go on many events.
Some people say that war is good for...
Shout out to Be Amazed, who made this episode 1 month ago. Insane war that obviously failed. And I just have to take it. It's somebody wearing a cap with a magazine on the side and trying to shoot. And you can explain what he's saying. So, let me quickly just... And now we
Absolutely nothing. But it has encouraged militaries all over the world to create some insanely wacky weapons. From this personal helicopter to an anti-tank motorcycle. And of course, the sword whip. So get ready to lock and load as we explore all of this and more, charging into history's...
The sword whip is like Mitsuri's sword. If you watch Demon Slayer, yeah, Mitsuri's sword is literally that. It's a flexible sword with a sharp end, as you can understand. And then we have, I know this thing. There's this rolling thing. I think it's called I don't remember.
The weirdest weapons that totally failed. Have you ever dreamt about owning a vehicle that combines the maneuverability and style of a motorcycle with the explosive power of a tank?
That's what I'm talking about!
Well, then look no further than the Vespa 150 TAP. The
Vespa. Well, a Vespa is basically just a motorcycle with shotgun shells and front. I don't know where the ammo is stored, but my theory under where you drive it.
Developed by the French military in the 1950s, the TAP was designed to be a nimble, lightweight vehicle that could provide explosive firepower on the battlefield. As you can see, the vehicle is quite
It's actually very well designed. First, it has the movement of a motorcycle, and also it's just excellent. It's excellent battles.
literally just a civilian Vespa with a giant gun stuck on the side. But the scooter was outfitted with a reinforced frame, equipment racks, and customized gears that allowed it to accelerate faster and navigate rougher terrain. All of this was...
Yes, yes. I actually wasn't around when World War II was. Again, I was born in 2016. It was in the 90s. But this is amazing.
Powered by a measly 145cc engine, but this still allowed the 250-pound monstrosity to reach speeds upwards of 40 miles per hour. The gun awkwardly mounted on the moped was an American-made M20 75mm recoilless rifle, a weapon that ejects gas out the back as it's fired to thrust the gun forward and counteract any recoil. This design typically allows large weapons to be fired by individuals.
That's actually a very smart idea and touch that. Because then if you're dashing, if you shoot mid-thrust, you're just going to get a quick maneuver. And you will not want to stay still when you're literally exposed out on the battlefield. So, yeah, it's pretty useful.
Soldiers, and in this case, it allowed the 150 TAP to fire without being completely destroyed. These shots packed a wallop, and the 150 was capable of firing explosive anti-tank rounds that were stored directly under the driver's butt. This meant that the little...
Stored? Bro, it makes sense if it was stored like in the trunk, and then the trunk was connected to that, and then a special contraption puts them on line, and then contraption that shoots revolvers, shot it out, and
Moped was able to go head-to-head with tanks, but you had to pray that you didn't drive over a dramatic speed bump while whizzing around the battlefield. As if all of this wasn't ridiculous enough, the 150 was designed to be used by paratroopers, and the mopeds were parachute dropped out of planes alongside a regular Vespa that would carry extra ammunition. Between 500 and 600 taps were produced, and they even saw use during the French-Algerian War, which lasted from 1954 to 1962. But why were they never used again? Well, despite French soldiers appreciating the mobility, it was pretty awkward to use the weaponry.
I would actually use it if I had, if I was in the war. Because this thing, the only thing I would tweak is to make it stored in a trunk with the special system, which fires 10 times stronger than a revolver. It'll also make the thing, make a bit wider to add, well, an extra wheel. Like, I would make it to, like, have a little cluster, and then I would make it so it curves, and then add it there. That way it can't fall, and it would have no problem passing bumps. I would also make it have another gun with the same system, also stored in the trunk, in the second half of the trunk. They would be separated. And this would allow it to basically shoot regular bullets onto regular soldiers so it wouldn't get immediately shut down, and anti-tank anti-tank bullets, which are really broken.
It just wasn't practical to shoot the seat-mounted gun while the Vespa was in motion. So to aim, you had to stop and reverse shimmy the vehicle until it was facing your target. This made you incredibly vulnerable to enemy soldiers and
you can just do a quick turn and just shoot them. That's more realistic.
Gangster putera criminalera.
My name is Maxim, and I'm not going to talk about any of my personal issues. You finally can get away with them on Hacker.
and tanks. And essentially, it soon became clear that a Vespa wasn't the safest vehicle to use when getting around a battlefield.
It's not the safest vehicle to use, because I think also they had to add a see-through on board glass in front, so you wouldn't get immediately hit. Also, one on the back would be along with these other tweaks would be broken. And I think it would have all the way around, and you would have to insert a key and unlock the bulletproof glass.
But a moped isn't the craziest place.
Would single-handedly make it stronger than any weapon besides aerial weapons. That's the only weapon it can bring down. Because it's just really useful ground maneuver.
That a giant gun has ended up. That title goes to the gun helmet, a weapon that brings an entire...
Yeah, I see Nordic quality in this one. Basically, it's just a helmet with a gun strapped on top, and you have an aim chain or something.
Entirely new meaning to the term headbanger. Developed in 1916 by American inventor Albert Bacon Pratt, the fire armor was intended for use during the First World War, and it features a mid-caliber firearm fixed to the front of a modified military helmet. Pratt's intent was to create a weapon that soldiers could aim simply by turning their heads, keeping their hands free. Finally, soldiers can fire a weapon and check their phones at the same time. But wait, I hear you ask, if you don't fire the gun with your hands, how do you shoot it? Good question. With a mouthpiece you blow into, obviously. It isn't clear how this worked, but according to...
I think it then pushes, the system... I think the air breath, if you blows a piston, and all it needs is a tiny bit of human DNA in it, and then it activates the thruster. Actually, no, the force activates the thruster, and then it just thrusts and does the shot.
Pratt, you really could fire a bullet like a flautist. He believed that one of the benefits to this was that it would allow soldiers to fire the gun in total darkness, or if they were blind, as people instinctively turn their heads toward danger when they hear it. Now, we here at Be Amazed support equal opportunity hiring practices, but I think most blind people would agree they shouldn't be your first choice for a rifleman. In addition to other flaws, like your trigger tube getting pinched, accidentally firing when you sneeze, or soldiers wearing the ridiculously...
Imagine your X-ray.
Soldiers wearing the ridiculously large helmets, bonking their heads on everything, the gun helmet is an obvious recoil issue. Imagine if, when you fire a gun, the pushback of the recoil wasn't evenly distributed along both of your hands and arms.
Bro, your spine will break using this weapon. I'm gonna rank them obviously failed or not failed. The Waspa goes in actually a specialty or could be tweaked to make it better. Basically, it could be just changed to make it the most broken weapon ever. For ground or air. If it's both, then it would take way too much resources. But this would be a total failure. No tweak can save this weapon. Because the recoil will break your spine. Lie like this, and then you would be open because you can't see. You're also your legs might break or your arms, depending on which takes more recoil more often.
But instead was placed squarely on your neck. Ouch. Now, Pratt claimed the gun helmet design took this into consideration, but I didn't find any evidence of this beside him saying, "Trust me, bro." So you won't be surprised to hear that the American military passed on Pratt's dome rocker. As the decades rolled by, however, the U.S. did see the utility of multiple different helmet-mounted devices, such as lights, radios, and HMDs, or helmet-mounted displays. So it would be nice to think that the U.S. military took inspiration from Pratt's device, and from now on, when it comes to helmet-mounted weaponry, that might just be my head canon. Whether it's guns or, well, all other aspects of life, we men know that bigger is always better, right, fellas? Well, back in World War I, the Russian military clearly figured the same as they set out to make the largest and craziest tank the world has ever seen, the Tsar tank. It was a mobile piece of weaponry designed to demolish blockades and even...
Actually be really useful. First, it's like a Waspa with the gun. If it had little weaponry for anti-tank and normal people, and also if you just make the sides have two wheels, the gigantic wheels too, it would be slightly more elevated, but it would be a better weapon because then you can aim fairly. It should really stand as compensation between
fortresses all on its own. It was absolutely enormous at 30 feet tall, which is roughly the same size as a 3-story building. As you can imagine, this big boy was pretty heavy too, and it weighed in at a hefty 60 tons, 9 times heavier than an African elephant. The heavy vehicle also boasted some heavy weaponry, as it was outfitted with 2 57mm cannons and 2 Maxim machine guns. In order for this thing to even move, it was powered with an aircraft engine that could propel it to breakneck speeds of up to 10 miles per hour, which is actually faster than I would have thought. Especially impressive considering that it's...
That's the problem. You could give it. How to fix this problem? First, make its size be a half building instead. Ditch those giant wheels. If originally this made in a modern generation, make robotic hands which move when you command them to. Like Irang Busirang, who moves by moving his hands forward. How much were in the group?
A reverse tricycle design, supporting 2 large wheels in the front and 1 small roller in the back. If you think that might make the machine hard to control, you're not wrong, because the Tsar tank required a crew of no less than 15 soldiers to operate. Now, despite these flaws, Tsar Nicholas II immediately commissioned the tank to be built after seeing a small wooden mock-up of its design. A prime example of the kind of decision-making that made him, oh, so popular with the peasants. But the Tsar gets what the Tsar wants, and one of these loony tanks was built in 1915. Now, fortunately for the world at large, when they tested the vehicle, they found that the tank's size, weight, and crew requirements made it highly inconvenient. Worse still, its little dinky roller regularly got stuck in the earth and prevented the whole thing from moving. Now, you don't exactly want your super tank being rendered a giant useless paperweight if it drives over a puddle. So, the project was canceled, and the only Tsar tank built was disassembled for scrap in 1923. I think this tank was always doomed to Tsar-tane failure, but
Yeah, I'm gonna put it in the tweak here. So
But the world didn't learn from Russia's mistakes, and other militaries went on to develop weird and wacky tanks of their own. This monstrosity is the Great Panjandrum,
Oh my god! What is that?
a tank designed by
I think I know how this functions. I'm gonna leak it right now, so this annoying voice doesn't have to say it to you. But it is basically
Capo, cappuccino,
not a tank.
assassino!
It's just 2 massive wheels and a box. This metal container, and in it is like dynamite. Like the whole box is just dynamite, 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 dynamite. So yeah, basically that.
the British during World War II. Most military vehicles use their wheels to help transport soldiers and weapons, but with the Panjandrum, the wheels were the weapons, as the entire tank was essentially a rocket-propelled battering ram. The Panjandrum's job was to plow straight into the enemy, using its 2 10-foot-tall wheels to crash through their fortifications. The tank didn't carry guns, but it would be loaded with 4,000 pounds of explosives. So once it pushed through the enemy line and reached its target, it could detonate to cause mass destruction. Unlike the pathetic Tsar tank, the Panjandrum could reach speeds of up to 60 miles per hour, which is pretty impressive considering it looks like something the X-Men would fight in a comic book. It was hoped this mighty death trike would be ready for D-Day to help the Allies smash through German Atlantic Wall in occupied Europe. This was essentially a thick line of fortifications with concrete walls, mines, and heavy artillery that the Germans built along the European coast when they took France and Norway. But as cool as the idea of the Panjandrum is, its flawed.
We didn't have our country for 500 years. Are you serious right now, bro? Brother. Our ancestors barely survived. I don't understand why I'm not in England right now. But yeah. You think you get the point.
Must become self-evident when you describe the thing out loud. A giant, driverless, rocket-propelled Segway loaded with explosives. The vehicle underwent testing in 1943, and as you can imagine, it didn't go well. Now,
Okay, that just bumped it from can be tweaked to the best, to one of the best weapons. If it was set up somewhere not near an ocean, it could blow up any wall you would imagine. Basically, once it hits a wall, it initiates a nuclear bomb ton of bombs. It initiates a bullcrap of bombs, instantly blowing up anything which is not as tough as titanium. I have no this, but yeah. This thing is one of the most impressive weapons I've ever heard about.
the rockets fired and the Panjandrum went flying across the testing site. It was impossible to control, and the vehicle was simply too dangerous and unreliable to produce en masse. So the Brits scrapped the idea, right? Wrong. They figured the highly dangerous machine simply needed more rockets.
What's going on with you? What are you talking about?
And a further test was conducted in 1944. This was even worse, as the machine's rockets detached from the wheels and started firing off in random directions as the vehicle itself.
Should be unpredictable. For that, I would make another weapon. I would call Great Pangenum 2. Basically, this weapon would have a billion, not a billion, but just a bunch of which was strapped onto it. Inside would be explosives, the same amount of the old one. But instead of just nuking it, it would launch every single rocket that kid has on soldiers. Imagine what something you can like 40 missiles flying each direction. Explain what he's trying to do in there, but yeah, anyways. Okay. Let me quickly just here. And now we are
Absolutely nothing. But it has encouraged militaries all over the world to create some insanely wacky weapons, from this personal helicopter to an anti-tank. Turned and started thundering towards the spectators.
I would probably put it in a special category. I would call can't be two versions. I want to make a version which straps 1,000 dynamite. 1,000 dynamite basically. I would say 1 billion, but it should not be able to strap a bunch of dynamite onto a weapon which can really roll at 60 miles. With 40,000 grams of kilograms of explosions inside of it. And the purpose of this weapon, it will also have the same amount, is instead of just rolling and boom, one of its goals would be to spread missiles in every single possible direction. Imagine 40 missiles coming towards one direction. And it would also do it on the diagonal angles too. Remember what a diagonal is? It's basically the center. It's basically the center. For example, a left corner center. Upper left corner center would be in between left. Between north?
Watching the trial. Fortunately, as the admirals and generals watching dove for cover, the last of the Pangendrum's rockets fired, disintegrating the entire vehicle in a violent explosion. Talk about pandemonium. Afterwards, the vehicle was scrapped due to safety concerns, but at least the Pangendrum was unmanned, so nobody was harmed during the test.
Inner peace.
Unlike our next deadly vehicle. Question, when you saw the Green Goblin and Spider-Man zipping around on his glider, did you think, man, that looks safe, practical, and easy to manufacture? No? Well, don't tell that to the U.S. military.
A real eye-opener on display here today is the Army's newest means of air transportation for...
Broken as fudge. as 3 tons of brain evaluation. First, you can attach bombs onto your powers. I think those are bombs. And you can just have a dinner switch. And you can turn them on and drop the bomb. You remember you could saw a bomb, but instead of one bomb which was a bigger explosion than my area, it would do 4 tiny bombs capable of really blowing up anything.
Troops in the field. Officially, it's the Delacar Aerocycle. Unofficially, the flying platform.
No, that isn't a clip from a action Looney Tunes movie. So covert. The Aerocycle answers the question nobody's asking. What if a helicopter could only transport one person and put their lives in constant danger whilst doing so? But still, the U.S. Army ordered 12 units for testing, and the finished Aerocycle featured a 32-kilowatt engine mounted on a circular platform above 2 15-foot propellers. The pilot could control the Aerocycle via a set of handlebars while leaning in different directions to alter the pitch and acceleration. Kind of like a high-tech Segway that you can operate 5,000 feet in the air.
Oh, come on! You gotta admit this is cool!
To land, the original Aerocycle featured 4 large airbags on the bottom. However, the pilots were worried that if one of these bags burst, they'd get
Bags with bombs, and when they reach the floor, because the first they would explode, they would be with miniature bombs.
rocket into the air like a deflated balloon. So these were replaced with 4 landing skids instead. Now this may come as a surprise, but the problems with the Aerocycle weren't down to functionality. It actually worked great. The machine was stable, easy to control, and even had a shockingly fast top speed of 64 miles per hour. However, while the invention worked, there was just no getting around the constant danger it posed to the pilot, as they were forced to stand.
Instead of glass around and make a special code, and they would have to keep a key with a special code on or fingerprint. You put in the fingerprints all the joints, their writings on it, and they could unlock it and put in their fingerprints. Put in the keyhole. And plus, there's no keyhole on the outside. What if there's a lockdown? Well, then, if it stops, fingerprint stops.
And directly above 2 giant rotating blades.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard!
Furthermore, actually using the Aerocycle made you stand out like a sore thumb. And once spotted, the pilot was completely defenseless. Even hucking a rock with good aim could take them out of the sky. The U.S. military looked past these red flags and continued testing the chopper. But when their experiments resulted in 2 crashes and some serious injuries, they abandoned the Delacar and the idea of personal helicopters altogether.
It never was supposed to be.
Still, the Aerocycle is far from the craziest airborne weapon that the U.S. has experimented with. During the second...
Here's what they actually added. So if I started listening to I would make it a password code. The password code would be
World War, the Office of Strategic Services, which was the precursor to the CIA, attempted to upgrade America's Air Force by weaponizing animals in several insane ways. We've all heard the saying, it's raining cats and dogs, and the OSS wanted to make that a reality by fitting cats with little kitty parachutes and bombs to rain destruction on the enemy below. The cats would be dropped into enemy waters where they would apparently instinctively swim towards enemy ships to get out of the sea. Once they were on board, the bombs would detonate, blowing up the boats and the poor kitty trying to get to dry land. Was this plan cruel? Yes. But was it effective? No.
Why isn't it possible?
It's just not.
Why not?
As it turns out, getting cats to do anything is near impossible, and when the plan was tested, the kitties all lost consciousness in mid-air during the drops due to the stress of being thrown out of a plane and the low G's. But even if those insolent cats aren't following orders, then why not just try another animal, like, I don't know, bats?
You sure about that?
That's what dentist Adam Little figured as he came up with the idea to strap incendiary devices to bats before dropping them onto Japanese settlements in giant hollow canisters. At the time, lots of Japanese buildings were constructed out of bamboo, so Little thought that if the bats could roost in the homes and then ignite, they'd cause serious damage to Japanese infrastructure. He wrote the White House in 1942 to explain the concept, and President FDR personally expressed his interest in the project, telling the U.S. Army to start experimenting with it immediately. But despite the seal of approval, the tests were, unsurprisingly, a complete failure. Bats were even less cooperative than the cats. They would fall asleep, refuse to fly away, and worst of all, use their navigational skills to fly back to the U.S. military base where they originally came from. You know, the safe, warm place where they were fed and taken care of. I wonder why. This issue ended up causing an enormous fire at the Carlsbad military base as the bats returned home and destroyed an entire airfield. Maybe Adam should have stuck to treating teeth. And we should stick to using people for warfare from now on. Or better yet, none of the above. Is there anything cooler than a gun that doesn't look like a gun? Well, we all love it when James Bond clicks his pen and it fires a rocket, but it turns out humans have been obsessed with this idea for a long time, dating way back to this incredible gun shield. Believe it or not, Elden Ring didn't make this idea up. They were first designed in 16th century Italy before being adopted by King Henry VIII during his reign in England. The large round shields feature a matchlock pistol in the center, which could be fired at would-be assailants whilst providing the soldier cover. The best defense is a good offense. And the shields even included a sighting grill for the user to look through and stay protected. Or as I like to call it, ye old gun sight. Henry loved the idea, so he had 100 made for his bodyguards. But the wacky weapon had some obvious drawbacks. Firstly, trying to aim a gun with an enormous metal slab.
Okay, the band.
Believe it or not, Elden Ring didn't make this idea up. They were first designed in 16th century Italy before being adopted by King Henry VIII during his reign in England. The large round shields feature a matchlock pistol in the center, which could be fired at would-be assailants whilst providing the soldier cover. The best defense is a good offense. And the shields even included a sighting grill for the user to look through and stay protected. Or as I like to call it, ye old gun sight. Henry loved the idea, so he had 100 made for his bodyguards. But the wacky weapon had some obvious drawbacks. Firstly, trying to aim a gun with an enormous metal slab on your arm was very difficult. Secondly, the wielder was put in the awkward position of having to decide whether to point the gun at their enemy's torso to shoot them, or point the shield towards their weapon to, avoid getting hacked to pieces. This made the gun shields pretty useless. And to top matters off, evidence suggests that they were likely hastily made. Only 46 survived, and 8 of those were found aboard a single shipwreck, the Mary Rose. This suggests that they only experienced fleeting popularity, and many of them even appeared to simply be pre-existing English shields called targes, with the gun element haphazardly slapped on. So the weapon wasn't really thought through or used, but hey, at least it inspired this. The shotgun shield wasn't Henry's only contribution to history's arsenal of weird weapons, and in addition to stuffing firearms into targes, He also requested a custom-made gun mace. That's right.
Ooh, just like a bat and also a mace.
A boomstick that you can also smack someone upside the head with. What's not to like? This awesome weapon had an equally awesome name, the Holy Water Sprinkler. Its steel Morningstar head boasted 10 spikes, and instead of firing bullets from the sides, its 3 gun barrels were located on top. It definitely looks fearsome, but as you can guess, it wasn't very practical. You'd have to awkwardly extend your arm completely straight whilst holding the weapon to fire it. And to make matters worse, you had to ignite each barrel manually by lighting the gunpowder with a piece of hot coal. So the problems Henry faced with the gun shield were magnified by about 100 times here, as the weapon was just so awkward to hold and fire. Seriously, imagine trying to actually shoot someone with this thing without blowing yourself or one of your buddies away. Worse still, if you want to use the thing as a melee weapon, you're only a few smacks away from rendering the gun part unusable anyway. So all evidence suggests this would be a terrible weapon to actually use, but Henry actually had it designed more as a curiosity. Interestingly, the weapon was often referred to as Henry's walking staff. So maybe the king just built it for show, carrying it around to demonstrate how cool his weapons were, like a 16th century mall ninja. Old Henry's weapons seem pretty unique, but it turns out he was just ahead of the times. Guns hidden inside canes were briefly fashionable amongst the wealthy in the late 19th century, as people started carrying them around for protection. And then when Chicago experienced a rapidly rising crime rate in the 1920s, an inventor called Samuel Schwartz decided to create an even more covert method of self-defense. His totally sane option, the machine gun vest. Didn't see that coming, huh? The unnamed device was comprised of a metal chest plate with a machine gun embedded in the center. The wearer would place 2 rings around their fingers, which were attached to wires connected to the gun. One string would raise the trajectory of the barrel, while the other would pull the trigger. So if the wearer was held at gunpoint, they could simply raise their hands to blow their would-be assailant away. Now, not much is known about Samuel Schwartz outside of the articles from 1929 in Popular Science and Modern Mechanics. But we know his invention didn't catch on, and it ain't hard to see why. Reach for an item on a high grocery shelf. Oh no! Friend goes for a high five. Oh no! Raise your arms during your favorite psalm at church. Oh no. The machine gun vest is just a ridiculously dangerous invention. But Samuel wasn't the only one to come up with the idea. 3 years earlier, in 1926, an issue of Modern Mechanics showed a German inventor who pitched a suspiciously similar device that used a chest-mounted pistol rather than a machine gun. I guess that would make it slightly safer, but you have to wonder whether Schwartz stole his idea from here, because whoa, hold the phone. Dogs, cross eyes cured with glasses? What? Forget the gun vest. Why was this breakthrough lost to time? Samuel's invention seems like something out of a cartoon or a video game, but while plenty of weapons work great in fiction, they aren't so useful in the real world. Wielding a giant greatsword might be a viable strategy in Dark Souls, but in reality, I'd throw out my back just trying to lift it up. Similarly, while the sword whips in games like Soul Calibur and Elden Ring look awesome, nobody would actually wield them in real life, right? Wrong. This mesmerizing weapon is the Urumi, a flexible whip sword that hails from southern India and first emerged sometime between the 4th and 2nd century BCE. An Urumi typically consists of a 5-foot-long cord and an iron handle, usually with a crossguard. The cord is affixed with thin, razor-sharp blades, and some Sri Lankan variants have as many as 32 metal teeth lining the cord. The weapon is often wielded in one of two ways. Offensively, in which you strike at an opponent from range, as you would a typical whip, or defensively, which involves revolving the whip around yourself in a figure eight, creating a whirring metal death barrier between you and your foe. Technically speaking, this is what we call sick as hell, and absolute practitioners still train and even duel with the Urumi in India today in a form of martial arts called Kalaripayat. This saw a revival in the 1920s as part of a broader movement to preserve different Indian cultures. The weapon is often paired with a small shield to offer some defense. But I don't think you need me to explain just how dangerous this weapon is. The razor-covered whips move fast, and one wrong twirl or stylistic flourish could easily blind, maim, or even mortally wound the person wielding the weapon, let alone their opponent. Though that said, Kalaripayat is just like any other martial art. Extremely impressive and scary looking to an outsider, but a skilled practitioner knows exactly what they're doing. Beginners in Kalaripayat also don't use a real Urumi for years, instead practicing with a similarly weighted cloth until they've mastered the basics. Practitioners also have to perform frequent maintenance on their weapons, as they become less reliable and predictable when broken or rusted. With all this in mind, the weapon isn't really a failure. Evidence suggests it was always used more for personal combat, dueling, and defense, rather than large-scale war. And that makes sense. After all, if you want a mid-range weapon, a spear will prove easier to handle and requires less upkeep. But yeah, it's not as cool. I'll give you that. Another great example is this double-barreled cannon. Its story begins in 1862 when a dentist called John Gilliland decided he'd had enough of destroying people's teeth with old-timey implements, and he wanted to destroy people's entire bodies instead by developing weapons. Gilliland worked off the timeless idea that two is always better than one, and this monstrosity was the result. Did I mention he was a Confederate? What a surprise. Double-barreled cannons had been tested before, notably by the Italian inventor Antonio Petrini in 1642. In his design, both cannons needed to be lit manually at the exact same second, as if one fired before the other, it would misalign the entire weapon, and the second cannon would fire wildly off target. Gilliland wanted to improve on this, so his cannon was able to fire both barrels at once, and the cannonballs were connected by a chain. The intent was that, in addition to the traditional damage of the munitions, the chain would also maim any soldiers standing between the cannonballs. Nice. To maximize the chance of this happening, the cannons were positioned facing slightly away from each other, so the chain would be pulled taut. But when the Confederates tested the weapon, this proved to be a bit too destructive. Shortly after it was fired, the chain between the cannonballs snapped, which sent them shooting off in random directions at great speeds. This ultimately damaged...
Honestly, both weapons. If it's shattered, it would go to two randomly. I'd be like, earthquake them. Surrounding enemies. Additionally, if it teamed together, it would just scrap it. Or like, kaboom or something, the sheer force.
Buildings, tore down trees, and killed a poor cow without a single shot coming close to target. Despite this failure, Gilliland still tried to sell the weapon to the Confederates, who obviously didn't... Wait, I'm actually reading that they actually bought it, despite knowing it didn't work, despite the idea not working for 200 years. No wonder these guys lost. Every time the Confederates tried to use the weapon, it failed miserably, so eventually they just started using it as a single gun that could be fired to alert nearby troops of an attack. Today, it can be visited as a local local curiosity in Athens, Georgia. And sure, it's a pretty cool sight. But I really think the display should be dedicated to that poor defenseless cow. Speaking of animals, what do you think are the most dangerous creatures in nature? Tigers? Sharks? Tiger sharks? How about the pill bug? What? That's not threatening at all? Well, don't tell that to Germany, who were so inspired by the fearsome creatures that they modeled a tank on them during World War II. Introducing the Kugelpanzer, or if your German is a little rusty, the ball tank. This weird little contraption was powered by a 25-ton horsepower engine, which allowed it to travel at a blistering 5 miles per hour as it rolled around on 2 large side-mounted wheels. In theory, this low top speed combined with the giant wheels would let the driver travel stably on any terrain. But the Kugelpanzer only featured this one tiny little window to see out of. And that makes sense from a minimizing vulnerability perspective, but not from a being able to see anything whilst trapped in a rolling ball on the battlefield perspective. Alongside this low visibility, the Kugelpanzer wasn't armed with weapons, so the defenseless little pill bug was likely designed for scouting rather than direct warfare. Man, what were the Germans thinking? Unfortunately, we'll never know, as the Kugelpanzer was an experimental project, and the only evidence of its existence is a single model seized by the Soviet Army in 1945. While the Soviets revealed what they'd found, the German government were so embarrassed that they denied ever building it, and it was claimed that the vehicle was a hoax created by the Soviets. However, its early discovery and craftsmanship would make it a very elaborate hoax. And what would be the point? At this point, the Allies had already won the war, so why would the Ruskies spend money on creating a parody German tank? Either way, the Sol Kugelpanzer is still housed in the Kubinka Military Museum in Moscow, so you can see the ridiculous vehicle for yourself. But unfortunately, as we've seen, this kind of wacky tank design isn't limited to Axis. In fact, shortly before the outbreak of World War II, a Texan inventor called A.J. Richardson pitched what might just be the most ridiculous military vehicle in history, the Tumbleweed tank. This
Tank is a so everything is empty. But you can't have
was a completely spherical tank covered in guns
yeah, no.
designed to roll into no man's land and blast indiscriminately at the enemy. A ball covered in guns sounds like a weapon a 5-year-old would come up with, but according to Richardson, the spherical shape was supposed to completely shield the driver from noxious gas, which had been a major concern in World War I. Unfortunately, despite capturing the imagination of military enthusiasts, the Americans didn't bite, as the flaws were just too numerous. From creepy dolls pointed at their ex-mother-in-law's home to trashing someone's roof using a chainsaw, get ready for even more deliciously passive-aggressive ways people got revenge. The amazed viewer Olivia was living with her partner when her friends told her a devastating truth. He was cheating on her. And he'd been mistreating her 2 cats when she wasn't around. Wow, sounds like a real keeper. Cheating was one thing, but he was about to learn a valuable lesson. Never mess with someone's cats. Unsurprisingly, she broke up with him. But to show there were no hard feelings, Olivia gave him some potted plants as a gift before moving out. What a forgiving gesture. Or so it seemed. You see, she'd actually secretly buried a ton of fly and spider larvae in the soil, turning the plants into grotesque bio-booby traps just waiting to be sprung. Spiders can be fully grown in as little as 2 weeks, and flies can develop up to 150 eggs a batch in just a few days. Gross. She didn't hear from him again, but the fruits of her labor got back to her while chatting with a mutual friend. Apparently, he'd stopped having people over because of some kind of bug problem. Yeah, that's putting it lightly. But what if you want your payback a little less subtle? Like, say, a chainsaw busting through someone's ceiling. The footage, captured by a neighbor in County Dublin, Ireland in 2023, shows 32-year-old construction worker Dominic Darcy cutting through the extension he'd built because the owner allegedly refused to pay him. This brash act of revenge only came after Dominic failed to get payment in less abrasive ways. Locals around the area said they saw signs calling out the homeowner for the unpaid work, and apparently Dominic even called, warning that if he didn't receive his money in the next 30 minutes, he'd come over and tear the roof right off. Well, I guess he was as good as his word. The owner took him to court, and if he's found guilty, it's safe to assume Dominic will lose more money than if he'd just taken the initial loss. But that's not what this is about. It's about teaching that homeowner a lesson in cold, petty revenge. One greedy landlord learned a similar lesson after trying to use their former tenant's green thumb to their own advantage. Ex-user Char Lautor has a friend who was forced to leave her beloved apartment after her landlord demanded a massive rent increase, which also meant abandoning the luscious garden they tended for years. To add insult to injury, the landlord was advertising the apartment using pictures of the garden as a main selling point. So the slighted tenant devised a diabolical plan. When it came time to move out, she carefully dug up every single thing she'd planted, completely ruining the once beautiful garden and leaving straggly grass and bare patches of dirt in its wake. Safe to say, the landlord was horrified when they brought the new tenants round and had to explain why the garden they just paid for was a barren mess. Let's just hope our galaxy-brained gardener found a new home for her plants. This next story from another viewer shows what happens when sibling rivalry goes too far. At age 15, Amy had a 12-year-old sister who was the family's golden child and a total brat. Her younger sister tormented Amy, always stealing her food, makeup, and money. But every time Amy went to her parents, they'd just make excuses, claiming she was only 12 and didn't know what she was doing. One day, her sister ran up to her holding their dad's expensive watch. Then, with an evil smile, she dropped it on the floor and smashed the whole thing to pieces. Before Amy could even respond, her sister ran off and accused her of breaking it. Amy couldn't do anything to prove her innocence, and to this day, their father still doesn't forgive her. Well, enough was enough. There was an upcoming party at school, and Amy knew exactly how she was gonna get her revenge. The big day arrived, and Amy's sister arrived at the party in her best dress. But rather than the gushing look she was expecting, everybody walked past and was pointing and laughing at her. At first, she couldn't figure out what was so funny, but then she started to notice a horrible smell. With growing anxiety, she rushed to the bathroom and discovered a massive brown stain on the bag of her dress. Ew. It turns out that earlier, Amy had made the nasty mark using the same foundation her sister had stolen from her, and then topped it off with a hearty blast of fart spray. The combined effect was very convincing. And to this day, people still call her Poopsie. Still, there are plenty more wild ways to take vengeance on a selfish sibling. Take Reddit user ObSnotMain. She'd never seen eye to eye with her half-sister Heather, but was getting engaged and felt obligated to invite her to the party. Meanwhile, Heather only saw the invite as an opportunity to one-up the bride-to-be. She sent Obs a picture of what she was planning on wearing, and calling her outfit extra would be an understatement. Despite the dress code being smart casual, she bought a fancy white strapless gown with sewn-in crystals and golden accents. Showing up to someone's engagement party in essentially a glitzed-out wedding dress would be a serious slap in the face, and Heather knew it. Obbs was furious, but what could she do? Well, that's when she decided to change the engagement party to a costume party. She messaged all her guests about the change, but Heather, she got no message. Instead, Obbs told their father to tell her, knowing he'd either forget or say something after it was too late. When the big day came, the guests all began showing up in wacky costumes, from ABBA members to anime characters. The bride and groom themselves came as Bubbles and Mojo Jojo from the Powerpuff Girls. But the star of the show was yet to arrive. Swagging in an hour late, Heather wore the same opulent dress she'd shown off earlier. But as soon as she realized her ultra-expensive outfit didn't stand out amongst all the crazy costumes, she exploded. Why were people not giving her all the attention? It was infuriating. However, the final blow came when Obbs' fiancé told Heather her dress looked amazing for a cheap costume. Unable to take it anymore, Heather fled the scene crying. Talk about a passive-aggressive power couple. Nothing burns my britches more than people illegally dumping their trash. This construction worker in Dorset, England, knows exactly how I feel. After arriving at work one day, he found a huge pile of trash had been fly-tipped on his freshly cleared site. What's wrong with people? Scattered among the garbage, there was a microwave, some cables, and a few garbage bags. But they also discovered a letter with the dumpster's address on it. So they did what any good citizen would, picked up all that trash in their digger and hauled it straight back to the litterbug's house.
Here we are. On the pavement. There we go. Be seeing you. Thank you.
It's enough to bring a tear to my eye, and I'm sure it'll bring a tear to theirs when they smell that heap of trash in their backyard. They say cheaters never prosper. Something Reddit user Low Myope taught his fellow students the hard way while studying at university. He was placed in a group, and together they had to complete an experiment before each writing up a 2,500-word report. Being a good student, Myope submitted his work a couple weeks early, freeing up time for more important things like beer pong. One of his group, however, didn't think so far ahead. She started just 2 days before the due date and called Myope in a panic, begging for him to share his report so she could understand the structure. Without thinking, Myope sent it over and almost immediately regretted it. The night before submission, she gave Myope another call, asking if he could check it over to make sure it's okay. Myope agreed, but was shocked to realize the work was almost identical. Well, he wasn't going to get accused of plagiarism because of his lazy group member. Oh no! How could she have been so moronic to send it back to him when it was a blatant copy? So, Myope made a few adjustments. He started by using the find and replace function to swap a load of commonly used words with swear words. Nice. Then he changed the entire methodology from a scientific process into a step-by-step recipe for spaghetti bolognese. But that still wasn't enough. He altered the data table to last week's football scores and changed all her references to names of Harry Potter characters. As a final cherry on top, he even replaced the conclusion with a confession of her plagiarism. Then he sent her the amended copy and waited for the inevitable phone call. The thing is, it never came. 3 weeks later, Myope heard the news. His lazy peer had submitted the altered version without even checking it. Who'd be stupid enough to do that? Well, I guess someone who'd make no effort to hide their plagiarism in the first place. Once the professors read her mess of a document, they called her into a faculty meeting for academic misconduct. And her attempts to explain the essay's strangeness only reinforced her confession of her original plagiarism. Unsurprisingly, she not only failed the module, but was also under threat of expulsion. sweet justice. But this story has one last twist. Over 5 years later, Myope learned that teachers at the university still use that report as a warning against plagiarism. That's crazy. Imagine executing your revenge so well that they start teaching it in schools. Speaking of cheating, here's a tip for anyone thinking of having an affair. Don't do it while dating one of the most famous people in the world. Because that's exactly what former soccer player Gerard Piqué went through after breaking up with pop singer Shakira in 2022. The star couple started dating in 2011, and over the next decade they moved in together and had 2 kids. So their breakup came as a shock. But things turned scandalous when Gerard immediately revealed a new relationship with a much younger 22-year-old Clara Chia Marti. Rumors began swirling that Gerard and Clara had actually become an item while he and Shakira were still dating. Well, the pop icon wasn't going to take that sitting down. In a scathing news song with record producer Bizarrap, Shakira sang, "I'm worth 2 22s, and you traded a Ferrari for a Twingo. You traded a Rolex for a Casio." The diss track quickly became a mega hit, surpassing 63 million views on YouTube in less than 24 hours. That must have hurt, but Gerard hit back with a petty media stunt of his own, showing up to work in a $10,000 Renault Twingo and signing a sponsorship deal with Casio. Talk about pulling in Uno reverse.
Also, every time I do these recordings, I always put the name on top. And this is just my honest reaction and words. I'm honestly... Yeah, this is too much.
The game of tit for tat took a sinister turn, however, when Shakira put this horrifying witch decoration on display at her Barcelona home. What? You see, the prop faces Gerard's mother's house, her former mother-in-law. Following the breakup, it was rumored that Clara and Gerard's mom started referring to Shakira as the witch. So Shakira was just having a bit of banter with it. Apparently, Gerard's mom did...
Love you guys, bye. Yeah. Bye.